This is a video about why the add-on system in Dead by Daylight is so unfun the way it currently works. For example, how many times have you loaded into a game just to have to face a nurse with broken add-ons or a blight who just makes the game unfun for everyone? The way things work right now, most add-ons give a straight buff to a killer's power. There might be a difference between rarities, but for the most part, it's a straight buff to a killer's base kit. And I feel like this makes it really difficult to properly balance a killer, because if you think about it, you want every killer to be viable at base kit level. Without any add-ons, they need to be strong enough to actually participate in the game. But at the same time, you also want to make sure that killers with add-ons don't suddenly break the game, while they're still buffing the killers, which kind of doesn't make sense. This makes certain killer powers way too strong using certain add-ons, and even Behavior knows that this is not balanced, because they recently started announcing community tournaments, and in the rules it states that you cannot use anything but common and uncommon add-ons, which doesn't even make sense in the first place, because a lot of the time rarity doesn't even indicate how strong an add-on even is. And in the worst case scenarios, some killers become entirely dependent on add-ons, which should never happen in my opinion. Can you remember old Ghostface or Wraith? A killer should never have to use add-ons to be viable in my opinion. Besides just being really annoying for survivors having to face the most broken shit ever, it's also really shitty for killers, because you have to bring add-ons, and if you don't, it feels like you're purposely putting yourself at a disadvantage. As it works right now, there's also just so many add-ons that are completely useless that you'll never bring into an actual match, and that just fluff up the Bloodweb. Let's look at an example here, the Jaw Smasher, which is a yellow add-on from Deathslinger. It increases his movement speed while aiming down sights by 1%. Then there's also the green variant, which boosts his movement speed while aiming down sights by 2.5% instead of 1%. But at this point, it's just negligible. Like, that's something that you're not going to notice. Moving on to another example. This is Pyramid Head, who is just known for his shitty add-ons. His yellow add-on increases Killer Instinct duration when triggered by Rise of Judgment by half a second. And then there's the purple variant. This is a purple, which does it by 1.5 extra seconds. That is ridiculous. Like, that is so shitty if you compare it to Alchemist Ring from Blight. So what makes an add-on actually fun? In my opinion, add-on becomes fun whenever it changes the gameplay style of a killer. So when it adds some features or changes the way you play them, and these often come with iridescent add-ons. Sometimes they're different rarities, but usually they're iridescent. One of the add-ons that I consider to be more fun is Myers' Vanity Mirror. It makes it so that you cannot progress past tier 2, but now you can see the aura of survivors through the wall, so it changes your entire playstyle. Same goes for one of Wesker's iridescent add-ons, which makes his power destroy pellets instead of just being able to vault them. Obviously you cannot vault pellets with that add-on on, but it also makes it so that he can get a bit of movement while he destroys a pellet, just like Nemesis can, which is really cool. The issue though is that you don't really ever get to see these add-ons. They're super rare, and most add-ons just straight up buff powers, or others are super weak, and you'll never get to use them because they are so weak. Like we talked about before, this makes balancing very whack, because you now have to consider the base kit of a killer, and that needs to be viable, but then you have these killers that have super strong add-ons, and then other killers that have super weak add-ons, and you need to keep it all balanced. If you really think about it, 2 add-on slots could vary wildly between killers. You could give a killer 2 add-on slots and it could be broken, and you could give another killer 4 add-on slots and it would still not be as strong as that other killer with 2 add-on slots, depending on the add-ons of course. And in my opinion, the only thing you can really do about this to actually make a change is just rework the system. So keeping a rework in mind, let's think about the bad sides and the good sides of the current system. But like we discussed before, what's the bad side? It's add-ons that change the strength of a killer that straight up buff a power. On the other hand, the more fun side is whenever an add-on changes the gameplay style of a killer. So it changes the way you play that killer or adds certain features which are interesting. Before I dive into the idea of a rework, I just want to take some time to explain the system of another game. Some of you might be familiar with the studio called NetherRealm. They're the creator of games like Mortal Kombat and Injustice. And for those that don't, they're fighting games. And in these games, when you choose your character, or after you choose your character, you get to choose a variation of them. For example, let's take a look at Jason from Mortal Kombat X. He's got 3 variations. His Unstoppable variation, which gives him extra regeneration abilities. His Relentless variation, which gives him extra grapple abilities, which makes sure you stay on top of the opponent. And then there's the Slasher variation, which gives him extra attacks with his weapon and some extra combos. The whole point of these abilities is to change the gameplay style of that specific character. So applying that logic to Dead by Daylight, why not make certain variations based on add-ons of certain killers that just change the playstyle of a specific killer? As a first step, I think it's very important to balance every new killer that comes out around their base kit. They need to be viable without any add-ons. Then as a second step, I would just get rid of all the add-ons that are straight up useless, straight up too strong, or that just aren't interesting. Then by combining the add-ons that you're left with, you could make actual interesting variations of killers that change the entire playstyle instead of just buffing some sort of power. For example, before the match, instead of where you usually select your add-ons, you could now select which variation of a killer you'd want to use in the match. As an example, let's use one of my favorite killers, Demo, who I think isn't necessarily too broken and isn't necessarily too bad. He's right there in the middle somewhere, which is perfect for an example like this. I made 3 different variations for him. A stealth variation, an info depth variation, and a lunge variation. I am not part of the balance team, so there's guaranteed to be something wrong here. It's guaranteed to be too strong or too weak, but don't mind that, just focus on the idea for now. Starting with the stealth variation, which I called the devious demo just for the sake of it. You could give him the effect of Red Moss, which increases the duration of the undetectable status effect by 8 seconds. It also removes all the noise that he makes when he gets out of the portal, and obviously you're gonna have to get rid of the sound effect, so you know that not every survivor in the map is immediately aware that you're traveling through the portal. On top of that, you could maybe give him the effect of the lighter, the green add-on, which makes survivors blind whenever they are under the effect of one of his portals, which kind of fits the theme of like stealth demo, you know? If any of these end up becoming too strong or too weak, you could always add the effect of another add-on on top of it, or you could maybe tweak the stats a bit so that they become less strong. Moving on to info demo, which I called instinctive demo. You could combine the effects of Lifeguard Whistle, which is a purple, with Sticky Lining, which is an uncommon add-on. And what it does is it makes Demo see the Killer Instinct effect whenever there's a survivor near one of his portals. And he doesn't have to charge his shred for it, his Of the Abyss, so he can always see whenever a survivor is near his portal. Another thing you could add on top of that is maybe an Iridescent, which lets him see every aura of every survivor whenever he travels through a portal. This one is kind of strong though, so if that's too strong, maybe switch it around with 11 Soda, which is a green one, which lets him see which generators are being worked on whenever he's going through his portals. Then last, but as we all know, definitely not least, we've got the lunge demo, which I called his Ravenous variation, which just buffs his shred a little bit. So maybe you could like give him Barb's glasses with Black Heart, so he shreds pellets a bit faster and he gets like a mini save the best for last on his shred. And if that's not enough, you could maybe also add Red Liver, which is also a brown add-on, which increases his movement speed a little bit when he charges his shred. And this just in general buffs his shred a little bit. Like I said before, I might have made these too strong or too weak, but you could always add more buffs to it, more add-ons whenever there's not enough strength in there, and you could always add downsides or take away certain effects if they're too strong. I think this would make a huge difference to balancing, because instead of having to balance around different combinations of 20 add-ons per killer, you now only have to balance around 3 variations per killer, which should be equal in strength if done right. I also believe this could be a massive help to newer players, because instead of having to memorize 20 different add-ons per killer, they would now just have to focus on 3 variations per killer, which all have like a certain theme to them, so it would be way easier to memorize and understand. I think it could also help newer survivors out a little bit, because if you see a demo that recovers a bit faster after you shred you now also know that he might be shredding pellets a little bit faster. On top of that, you wouldn't have to rely on the Bloodweb anymore. It wouldn't be based off of RNG whether you get a strong or weak add-on, and you also wouldn't have to worry anymore about bringing an add-on every single game, as you can now always choose between 1 of 3 variations. I do realize that this would make the system much less customizable, as you cannot choose 2 completely different add-ons anymore, but in my opinion it would definitely be worth it if it meant that the system was way more balanced than it is now. I understand that this idea isn't flawless though, and if you have anything to add to it, or if you're seeing something that I am missing and you just want to point it out, make sure to do so, because I love talking about this game. Personally though, I would love to see changes brought to the system, because I think that it desperately needs them, but considering they took 5 billion years for eerie hatchets alone, I think it might be wishful thinking. But hey, let me know what you think. Something else Dead by Daylight has plenty of besides just add-ons are status effects, and if you do not want to run into a match and come across one that you do not know yet, make sure to watch this video as I go over every single one of them.